Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Complimentary Cinema, and we are your hosts.
This is Ken O'Malley.
And Brian McGarry. And I'm really glad that you're all here to join us tonight for tonight's topic of conversation. This might be the most important segment that we have actually covered on Complimentary Cinema to date. Would you like to give the intro on that one, Ken?
This is the seminal movie, the 1984 classic, Night of the Comet.
The Night of the Comet.
The Night of the Comet.
Well, I mean, the movie's called Night of the Comet, but it is the Night of the Comet.
Okay.
The emphasis is mine.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. This is a star-studded classic in the sense that the Robert Beltran from Star Trek Voyager fame is one of the top stars in this film.
And
And
whoever the hell the other lady is, she was in Days of Our Lives because Stephanie immediately knew that.
yeah, oh, really?
Immediately.
That's excellent.
Because the movie came up, she's like, oh, she's from Days of Our Lives. And I'm like, sure. I was thinking, isn't she from The Last Starfighter?
She was in The Last Starfighter, yes. Yeah, her name is Catherine Mary. It's a very good Christian sounding name that just goes in through the eyes and out the ears, and you just never think of it again. But she actually did find some work before and after this film, which was incredible. What's even more incredible is that Robert Beltran, a.k.a. Chakotay from here on out, actually managed to land any work at all after this film.
I'm going to disagree.
You're going to disagree, but okay. So what's a good for? Okay, well, first off, for all of the people at home who have no idea who Stephanie is, who's Stephanie?
Oh, that's my wife.
That's his wife.
She, unfortunately, for her, had to watch this film as well.
It really wasn't meant for her eyes when we selected this. I wouldn't really necessarily recommend this film to most people, and certainly not people with discerning taste.
There's a lot of reasons to disagree, but we have to talk about the movie first. We obviously have slightly different opinions of this movie.
We do have slightly different opinions on it, and so I guess I'll just jump in and just give a brief synopsis of the film. It takes place in Southern California in the early 80s. Film's made in 84. It appears to be set about that time. And there is a comet coming, which hasn't come since roughly 65 million years before. And they kind of allude in the opening narration, which was Dark City level bad, about how it was kind of an ominous thing, and they suggested it kind of had something to do with the extinction of the dinosaurs. They kind of hinted at that.
I will admit I laughed out loud when I was like, are we really doing this? Is this going to be this movie?
That was this movie, yeah.
Thankfully. They kept the voiceover to just the beginning.
I can't tell you how grateful I was for that, because that movie would have been unwatchable had the narration continued. It was completely unnecessary. Because any good film, you're going to have the exposition throughout the film or in key moments. You're not going to just dump it all out on the table because your audience is too stupid to figure it out.
Right. I think in a movie that had a bigger production value, you would have had an intro scene that was unrelated to the rest of the scenes in the film that was showing that instead of telling that.
And that's a big thing like in theater. It's show me, don't tell me.
Right.
You know,
you have a flashback of the dinosaurs and this comet going by and them all turning into dust. And then you come to current times.
Yes.
And the comet is coming back.
Yes. So the comet comes back, and there's a lot of people very excited about the return of the comet, which is incredible because in typical. So here's the thing. So comets usually are a part of the solar system. They usually are not interstellar debris just floating by. And many comets have orbital periods of, decades, centuries, thousands of years. But even when those comets come to Earth, they hang out in the night sky for days. And they're visible for days. But you have an incredibly long period comet, which goes for 65 million years for an orbit around the sun, presumably. But it's only visible for one night. That's strange.
They did not have a scientist on the payroll for this film.
I don't think they did either, especially since when the only time you actually see the comet, it looks like Superman's little Kryptonian star crib that he's gets shot out into space in the first Superman film. That's what that reminded me of.
Yeah. Honestly, that was probably the most forgettable part of the movie.
It really was. It just bleeds right out of the brain. So everyone's excited for this comet in very Independence Day style. They're all going outside and they're getting their silly signs and everything. I don't know who the signs are for, but lo and behold, they're out there. The comet comes, and anybody who's outside turns to brick dust.
Basically.
Red brick dust by the end of it, which is incredible because I don't believe the human body contains any red brick dust at all. But I'm not a doctor. I could be mistaken.
It was available at the time. There was they were tearing a wall down somewhere and they just swept up the dust and then use it as a prop.
That's really great economic sense when you're making a film because you got to cut those corners to really make that budget stretch.
Now I want to say apparently, because I did look this up, this movie did make money. This movie made quite a bit of money considering its budget.
What was the budget and how much money did it make, Ken?
The budget was roughly $700,000.
Wow.
Which, I mean, even in the 80s,
that's tiny.
That's like nothing. That's hardly anything. And it made over $15 million in box office.
Are you kidding me?
So this kind of movie, it captured a probably teenage, it had a lot of music. It had a lot of rock music. And, I'm assuming I didn't look up the trailer, but I'm assuming the trailer probably looked a lot better than the finished product.
It would have to, but what's also funny too is there's one clip in the film where they use Cyndi Lauper's "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," but I don't believe that is the Cyndi Lauper version. It did not sound like Cyndi Lauper, and it definitely is not the album version for sure. It's like they got a budget version of Cyndi Lauper to cover that song. It's kind of like in certain retail establishments on the Muzak overhead, you'll hear songs by the Eagles, but it's not the Eagles because of the licensing fees.
Yeah, that might have been the case.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I know where that entire $700,000 budget went, or rather not where it went, but where it came from. All throughout the film, you have just a ridiculous number of product placements. We've got Pepsi, you've got Audio-Technica. There was TIAC, and there was a couple others that I've already forgotten about, but there was just about any chance you got, there was a product placement there just screaming you in the face. And I bet each one probably cost them they probably got $100,000 out of it, and you get, half a dozen of them, boom, there's your budget.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like most of it was they didn't have to build hardly anything. It was obviously sets, too, that were real places that they dressed up, There was hardly any other people because the concept of the movie is that everyone who was outside died. So, I mean, that's what I think as far as the idea for the movie went, it was decent. And the way they treated it once everyone was dead, I felt it was fairly straightforward. Everyone was immediately how I would expect they would be. You got some dumb teenage kids who just want to go have some fun. You want people who are trying to take advantage of dumb teenage kids. And then, I don't know, then everyone else is dead, so except for a random guy in a convertible.
So just going back just a little bit. So the comet comes, turns everyone to dust. You have survivors. Not many, but you have a couple of sisters who wouldn't even pass for second cousins, but they're sisters in the film. And they end up going to the local radio station where they finally run into Chakotay, playing a slightly different version of his famous character. Initially intimidating and then just like a big pussycat.
I mean, Chakotay with a gun.
Chakotay with a gun instead of a phaser, but then it immediately just backs off like he did for 7 years with Janeway.
Wow.
I'm just saying. Star Trek, okay, just segue here. Star Trek Voyager, okay? You have the Maquis rebels, you have the Federation. They get stranded in a distant corner of the galaxy. In order to survive, they have to join forces. Now, the Maquis were the criminals. Chakotay led the criminals, all right, the people that the Federation were hunting down. And, he plays it tough the first episode, yeah, I'm a badass, and, you can't tell me what to do. And then by the end of the first episode, he's in a Starfleet uniform, and by the second episode, he's already Janeway's lapdog. There was more tension between Riker and Picard on Next Generation than there was with Chakotay and Janeway. Just saying.
This has been Star Trek Corner with Brian.
My pleasure.
Back to our regularly scheduled
Back to
program.
the regularly scheduled program. So they meet up with Chakotay, who initially, holds him at gunpoint because the comet, if it didn't turn you into a red powder, it turned you into a zombie. And I just want to point out that the first zombie that we see is a black man. So technically, the first person actually killed in this film is a black man that we see. And that's like that. The black guy dies first is an old trope.
I mean, except all the other people that died, but yeah.
Yeah, but you don't really see them or hear about them yet.
That's fair. Okay.
The
first on screen.
The first on screen dude who's dead, or I guess he's not necessarily dead because he's
it's the crappy projectionist guy is the first guy.
He's murdered. He's the first murder.
Okay, the first monster.
The first monster that you see is Black Alley Man. So anyway, so they all hang out in the radio station, and then Chakotay goes to San Diego to go check on his family, who are all understandably dead because everyone died in this comet, and he grabs a couple of personal keepsakes, fights a child, or rather runs away from a child.
Yes.
Much like Chakotay ran from everyone on Voyager.
He ran away from a child very inefficiently. I just want to point that out.
He really did. And that child busted through a door at one point, like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, which I thought was great. Because, however many times I see that effect of just like a person busting through part of a door, it's always really fun to see.
I think for me it was, he's trying to throw things down in the way between him and the child running through. And like in that case, you would think of something like a bookshelf or like something big and bulky that's going to get in the way. He literally, I think, grabbed like a light stand
and a bird cage.
I'm like, buddy, even if it's not a zombie, that's not going to stop anyone.
It really isn't. Yeah.
But he does,
He eventually gets out of the house and then runs away from his semi-truck. He's a truck driver, and you see him run away from the house in the opposite direction of his vehicle, and you're kind of wondering where the hell is he going. More on that later. Meanwhile, back at the radio station, the two sisters decide to go to a shopping mall where they're soon accosted by the partially zombified stock boys.
Well, and they want to have fun. I think we need to, we mentioned it earlier, but they really just play dress up.
They did. They played dress up. And
that's like their storyline there.
Yeah. And by this point in the film, I think we're probably, 60% of the way through the film?
Yeah.
And which brings me to the point of the awful pacing of this film.
It's a long 40% to the end of this film.
It really is. It just to get to the point of anything actually happening, you could probably cut 5 to 10 minutes out of every scene.
If I can also just to go back just a little bit. We
Please.
mentioned the music briefly.
Yes.
But there are many scenes earlier in this film when you would want to build tension and maybe suspense, and they just blast rock music while she's like going down the empty streets, and like things that should have been creepy are just like, it's almost like it's literally exactly like that. During the times when you would want to like, I think that's the hard part about this film is it does not build suspense at all. In any way. It's like when there's the creepy guys show up at the mall, they just show up. Like there isn't enough building up to it.
It's just like, here's Johnny once again.
There's nothing creepy about the mall until suddenly these people are there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the weird part is that there's no suspense building about any of it. It's just things happen and then we move on to the next thing.
And there's always music going.
And yeah, it's
like at one point, one of the partially zombified stock boys takes a shotgun and blows up the radio.
Yep. That
they was playing the music, and it was like, finally, thank God, someone figured it out. Turn off the music.
I thought that was hilarious too.
I mean, that was.
I really enjoyed that because I was like, something happened.
Something did happen, and what I love about those zombified stock boys is so they're hiding out in this mall, and they're just angry at these two young women for going in and like messing with their stuff. Never mind like the world's come to an end. Never mind that all these people have died. They're butthurt because they're not going to get a chance to move up the corporate ladder from stock boys into upper management. And these kids all look like they're in their early 20s. And I got to tell you, they're far too young to be that bitter and burnt out. At least I would think. Usually you need at least a full decade and a half of adult work and having various carrots dangled in front of you and having many illusions and dreams absolutely shattered and stabbed in the back before you reach that level of bitterness.
Yeah.
Just well ahead of their time.
I'll definitely say that was about the last direction I thought that storyline was going. Like, okay, you got some attractive young ladies in our mall. I thought it was going to be like, oh, let's go capture them. Like,
exactly. And do naughty things that like angry young men like to do to women.
But instead let's just go murder these people because they're in our building.
And they're damaging the merchandise.
Yeah, they shoot everything up.
Yeah. They're upset about the girls damaging the merchandise or taking the merchandise. Meanwhile, they destroy things left and right.
Yeah.
The boys do. So.
And it's like every single shelf. It's like one of those movies. It's like every single shelf of things gets shot, and then you go to the next shelf and all the things get shot. It's like you weren't actually shooting at the people. You were just shooting at all the things on all the shelves.
That reminds me a little bit of the in Terminator, in the tech noir, when the Terminator is trying to shoot Kyle Reese in the club, and Kyle Reese just jumps behind the bar, and the Terminator's just destroying all the bottles. It's kind of one of those.
Yeah. Except it goes on for a while.
A lot longer than the tech noir
it's
scene.
Multiple shelves. It's like them shooting from one way, then shooting from the other way, then, yeah.
Just a lot of destruction.
It is.
Just a lot of destruction. So eventually, the girls are rescued by... Well, they're rescued from the stock boys.
I was going to say, something happens in between. We've skipped.
We're the B plot to the well, or even the C plot.
Suddenly, out of nowhere, there is another whole plot with a whole nother cast of people.
And these people are scientists of some sort.
It's basically like an Area 51 kind of setup. You have
a secret government facility.
Secret underground government facility in the middle of the desert. And they already know that something's going to happen. They're already aware that this is going to happen. And they're using it as a test of like, everyone is the lab experiment. And they are going to survive in their bunker. So it's about that time that those plots finally merge. For some reason, the people underground decide they're going to take some people to test, even though that wasn't the original plan. So I don't know. They don't really explain that very well.
They never explain anything in this film very well.
Anyway, so shadowy government people are going to come take the people to do experiments with.
Well, they need blood so they can come up with a serum to cure the brick dust disease.
I just think it's funny they have this huge elaborate complex underground and they weren't like gathering blood already. Like that wasn't part of the plan.
That wasn't part of the plan, and then apparently they left the vents open so they received some exposure, thus dooming them all to a slow eventual death.
So anyway, though, they decide to send a team out. And that's where we all meet at the mall together.
Yes.
And they have a helicopter. and they abduct children. And then they abduct the characters.
Yes, the two sisters, the cheerleader and the arcade playing theater. What would you what do you call the person who works in a theater? An usher, I guess.
Yeah, I guess usher.
Yeah, I mean, she was an usher. I mean, really, she was just a pro arcade gamer.
She had all the high scores, too.
She did have all the high scores.
She was pissed off. Someone had her 6th place. She had to get rid of.
Oh, she was very angry about that. So...
No, we got the shadowy government people.
You got shadowy government people. You got shadowy stock boys.
It seems like they're coming to the rescue because they're taking out the stock boys.
It sure seems like it, but they're really up to their own nefarious goals and means. And there's one lady scientist who doesn't want to go with the other nefarious government secret people's plot points and plans, and tries to break away from them and ends up shooting a compatriot. We're given a full plot summary here.
But so basically, though, the important part of all that interaction is that the cheerleader lady gets left behind with one of the scientist people. She doesn't make the first trip out.
She doesn't. They get separated.
And so she stays with one of the scientist people who it looks like it's going to euthanize her. At some point behind her back, they had a conversation of basically like, this floozy chick ain't going to cut it. Like, she's not going to be any good for us. So we're just going to put her out.
Because the last thing that you want when the world's come to an end and everyone's dead is you want to kill a rather attractive blonde cheerleader, because that absolutely just wouldn't do you any good at all, would it?
And I just want to say, too, the 80s hair is incredible.
The 80s hair is incredible
It is
in
in
this film.
full effect for all of the female characters.
Absolutely. In particular, the cheerleader, whom I believe was called Sam.
Yeah. So anyway, it appears that she's going to be euthanized. And then that's when we move on with the rest of the nefarious shadow people plot. That's when we realize that they're starting to be infected, and they're kind of losing their minds. So then it turns into a, how will they all get out of this situation? And it looks really bad for everyone.
It sure does. And it looks bad for us trying to watch this, because while all of these things are happening, the plot, it's like watching the pace of this plot is like one of those old-timey hourglasses. I could have just said hourglass, but we're going to just call them old-timey hourglasses.
It's got that like antique sand in it
That just trickles down just ever so slowly. That is the pace of this film from start to finish. Like, it never picks up. There's never any... the only time that the pace... so like the quickest scene, like with the best pacing, is when Robert Beltran goes back to his mom's house to see if she's there. And then he has to run from the kid. I think they kept that scene down to like at least, like, I think it was under 10 minutes.
Well, and you know what? I think they spent at least 3 seconds building suspense. So, like, they did build suspense in that one scene.
For 3 to 4 seconds. I mean, let's be
3
generous
seconds.
here. Let's be generous here. 3-4 seconds, maybe 5 at the absolute most.
But that's why it's part of why I like it. And I know it sounds weird, but like part of what I like it is they treated those interactions so literal and like not like a movie, which is part of what I enjoyed about it. It didn't make it a good movie, but it made it interesting because it was so different.
There is a degree of like honesty in their performances.
It's like literally someone was like, imagine if this all happened, and didn't try to make it interesting. It's like someone made a what if movie.
And then they filmed it.
And just filmed it. There was
They just filmed it.
no tension, very little excitement for like a few moments here and there, and very little payoff.
And just talking about just the general effort in this film, one thing I love about so there's a lot of outdoor filming on Los Angeles city streets, and there's no one around. There's no traffic. Found out that was filmed on weekday mornings when traffic lights were at red and there could be no traffic. So they timed those very specifically. They didn't even necessarily cordon off traffic for a lot of those.
Also, interestingly, to do that too, is they colored the sky red the whole time, so you couldn't tell what time of day it was anyway.
They did. That was a very great way to mask that. Absolutely. And then they also filmed inside of a mall, which they did at night. And the only actual set that they built that I could find out was the radio station. That was built in an old warehouse, apparently.
See, that didn't even necessarily look built, as far as it was like a big room somebody put some props in.
And lots of neon.
Like, because it was not even set up the way you would set up a radio station. It was literally
No.
one big room, another big room that had the, quote, DJ in it, that was just a booth sitting in the middle of a room.
With reel-to-reel machines.
Yeah.
Why would you build...
But it turns out, too, anyway, that the radio station is completely fake because there's no person there. The DJ is completely recorded. The sound effects are completely all pre-recorded. It's just playing.
Well, what's incredible to me is that radio station has a bathroom. It's got neon lights everywhere. It's got leather couches. What appeared to be like a little gym area. So technically, certainly there were people who did work there at least at some point. But what I just can't get over is why would you have reel-to-reel machines on timers to play your programs? Because even by 1984, that would have been an antiquated way to go about that.
I think someone said this will look cool, or like it's a cool concept to have like the one reel stop
Sure.
and then the next reel start. Like visually, it's more interesting than what they would have actually done.
I'm just saying, like, compact cassettes were very much in vogue at the time. They had some very nice machines out. They had many different functions on
that's
it.
exactly the problem, is that they had this much budget and they literally found some reels that had some crap on them and a couple of machines they could hit play on, and none of it was actually,
Well, that's the real reason, Ken.
yes. Production value was not high.
I just want to know what the in-universe reason would have been for that.
It's just, it was that guy's,
Yeah.
maybe that's what he came up on.
Maybe he just,
he was an old man and he was like, this is
loved
what I know.
reel-to-reel. It's like, I got to have reel-to-reel in my radio station.
Yep.
And like almost nothing else. Because all you ever really see is like the 2 reel-to-reels and a mixer.
Yeah.
Like you don't see, you don't even see, and you see a few records and you see a label for turntable, but you never actually see the record player that I
Right.
recall.
Right.
You do see some VU meters though,
Mm-hmm.
bouncing around.
Like I said, it's all just visual. It's none of the stuff is like functional. It's just, it looked cool.
Lots of good close-ups, and like to the undiscerning person, they probably wouldn't know any better.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this, when I worked at a radio station, it was the size of a walk-in closet,
Yes.
maybe a couple of walk-in closets.
Walls, partitions,
Walls,
small
partitions,
enclosed spaces.
very small enclosed spaces. Like we had like maybe like a 6x6 entry room with a desk and some computers. And then we had a little recording booth that was literally the size of like a closet or a phone booth.
Yep.
Maybe 2 phone booths next to each other. And then you had the main DJ area. And I got to tell you, that was not more than maybe 8 by 8 feet.
Yeah.
And half of that was taken up with
Equipment and
with a-
racks and stuff.
Well, we had a huge stack of equipment. You had players, you had a couple turntables, you had your mixer, you had your headsets. So you had equipment, you had headphones, you had shelves built into the walls just full of CDs and such.
Right.
And I'm telling you, we had neon, but it was like crappy neon. And we had crappy lights and we had like old tattered posters. Like this radio station looked absolutely amazing.
It looked like a dance club.
It looked like a dance club with just like a random booth right in the middle.
Yep.
And I just want to know, like, where were the cables coming from that booth? Because I don't recall seeing any cables going into any equipment bays or anything.
That's what I didn't know. It was a warehouse. Apparently, it looked to me like they rented out like a club and like just put some props in it.
That would have made more sense with what they ended up doing.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been easier for them to just build a crappy little radio station
Yeah.
than it was to make it look like a nightclub.
We also didn't talk about how the underground layer and the desert, the above ground part of the desert, was also matte paintings.
Oh, lots of matte paintings, lots of forced perspective on that, because you get some, you get a couple of great little overviews of this, the nefarious government layer, and you always see like part of a close up of a guard. Who are they guarding it from? I have no idea. Everyone's dead, but he's there to guard things, to keep out maybe zombies,
Keep away country people.
keep away
As we
country
find.
bumpkins. Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of interesting details and stuff like that I did enjoy in this movie. Like, I don't think it was all bad. Like, it had a lot of problems, but I think what happened is it failed as an interesting movie, but I still enjoyed it.
So, having grown up in Southern California in the early 80s, there were certain little scenes and just street views and everything, and I was like, kind of like, oh, that made me, it was a little nostalgic for me in that regard. And it was kind of nice to see, and some of the musical choices were kind of neat. Let's talk about some of the actors in this, other than the couple that we've mentioned. There's Mary Catherine from Last Starfighter. I'm gonna get crucified for butchering that.
She's from Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives. The
That's what I've
soap
been
opera
informed.
actress. Well, both sisters were soap opera actresses prior to this film. I don't know. I know that Robert Beltran did do some work before this, and apparently he was still working after, because he managed to actually get hired for Star Trek in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
So somehow he was able to get by for over 10 years on credits such as Night of the Comet, which is more impressive than this film itself, I got to say, making $15 million on a $700,000 budget. But some of the other actors in here, we have one of the nefarious government scientists. I can't remember his name. I'm not going to remember any of these people's names.
Yeah.
I may have to address that in future episodes.
The names are super forgettable.
The names are.
I don't think the government people even all say their names, do they?
They don't really say their names, yeah. But I mean, just speaking of the actor himself, he was in Devil's Rejects, and he gets dispatched by the Devil's Rejects at one point. And he's been in a couple other things, but he's one of those weird character actors. He was the one with the bad toupee.
Okay.
And eventually he needed to wear the sunglasses.
Mm-hmm. To hide the
hide
zombiness.
his zombification that he was undergoing. And then in the mall scene, our heroine, whose name I've already forgotten, not Sam, but her sister, she takes one of the stock boys hostage, a blonde kid. That is actually Chris Pedersen. It was in the cult film Suburbia from 1983. It's about Southern California punk rockers. He also had a small role in Platoon by Oliver Stone in 86, and he also had a small role in Point Break in 91.
Okay.
So he was actually like a legit actor of sorts.
So
for
he was
this
on the
film.
fringe of a lot of period movies that were kind of influential.
Yeah, the biggest role I saw him in was in Suburbia, and he's not a half bad actor.
Yeah.
It's too bad he didn't get a little more work, but that's just how it is.
You know what else I forgot? I didn't even mention. Beginning of the film, the abusive stepmom.
Oh, the mom's super abusive. She literally punches her stepdaughter in the face in the living room in front of guests.
Yeah.
And nobody does anything.
Yeah.
Apparently that was the norm in the early 80s.
Yeah. Like she knocked her tooth out or loose or something like that.
Yeah, it was there was blood, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, that was just another minor character that was like, wow, she just punched her in the face and then died.
Well, that was amazing because the way that they introduce her, it seems like she's going to be a pain in the ass for the next 90 minutes of this film.
Yeah.
And she's dispatched in about 90 seconds.
Yeah, she's dust right away.
Just dust, like DMK.
Yep.
Just dust.
Yep.
Just, let's introduce this character, let's give you some backstory, and then it's not going to be important at all, and it's going to have no bearing on the rest of the film.
Yep. All right, so coming back to what we were talking about, the government people, they need to make a cure because they do not have a cure for this comet sickness.
Yes, they have to abduct humans and get their serum, and yet they seem to judge some of these people based on their intelligence.
I think maybe they were thinking like constitution, as far as like she wasn't hardy enough, and so she wasn't going to survive to give them enough blood.
A hot young blonde cheerleader doesn't have a hardy constitution.
It doesn't make any sense because they also abducted children.
They did abduct children.
And they're planning on taking their blood. So it doesn't really make sense, but
you're going to pass on the hot blonde cheerleader.
I think maybe they thought that was like, she just wasn't going to be worth it. But yeah, it doesn't really make any sense.
It makes no sense.
It's not even like universe logic, but
it's not in universe logic. It's not reality logic. I don't get it.
Anyway. So yeah, they're going to take the blood and they're going to make an antidote out of it. I guess from people that are already exposed was the idea.
So they make a point that they need a certain amount of blood from these people to make a serum. But they don't tell you what the serum is going to do necessarily or even how they're going to make the serum, just that they need blood.
Yeah.
They don't even say why they need these specific people's blood, unless I missed some major plot point when my eyes were glazed over at the pace of the film.
See, I think they were trying to be mysterious.
Is that what it was?
Air quotes, mysterious.
Air quotes, mysterious.
But really, I think it was just lazy writing. Because there was no particular reason they needed their blood. They just needed blood, apparently.
I don't know if it was necessarily lazy writing as bad writing, because this was written and directed by the same fellow, and I just want to point out, this was a passion project.
Yeah, I guess. He just had these ideas of, wouldn't this be cool? And then, just did it on a shoestring budget.
And he probably thought it was going to be his big break into directing bigger and better and amazing
He,
films.
he probably got paid, so I mean, I guess it worked out for him in the end.
I'm sure he got something for it.
Yeah.
You know, and then I'm just saying, like if I was a nobody loser like Tom Eberhart or whatever his name is, and I made a couple $1 million off a movie, I might just take the money and run after that.
Yeah.
You know, just count myself lucky.
Yeah.
And maybe he did the same. We'll have to ask him sometime if he's still alive.
We'll have him on the program.
We'll have him on the program in a future episode.
So anyway, the rising action comes to when we realize Chakotay is coming back,
which takes about what feels like the length of 2 other feature films.
I kind of forgot after like the whole he was in the house scene.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about him for a while because he was gone for so long. Then there was the whole mall, the whole shadow organization, like all of this other stuff happened. And I was like, oh yeah, he's in this movie still too.
And when he does finally show up, he shows up driving a classic Buick, which was really a very sweet car. But he's also wearing a Santa outfit. The movie is set around Christmas time.
Oh yeah.
But he shows up in a like 50s Buick red convertible car, which is just absolutely cherry and gorgeous. A bright red Santa costume full with fake beard, and carrying a dozen roses for presumably our gun-loving main heroine, Catherine Mary.
I completely forgot this was a Christmas movie.
It is technically a Christmas film, so I mean,
that's one of the other things he throws in the house. He throws down a tree.
He does throw down a tree. It is Christmas time, yeah. Even in the radio station, they talk about how there's only 11 more days for shopping.
There's also some vague Christmas music in the background in one scene.
That's true. That's true.
I forget which song it was, but it was vaguely Christmassy. When you feel like you got to where we were at. So basically, you know, there's going to be some kind of rescue plot. Like, how did you think this movie was going to end?
When things are at their lowest for them, I didn't actually care how it was going to end. I just was waiting for it to end.
Okay.
I didn't have expectations or hopes other than that the end of the film would meet me sooner than later.
Okay. I don't know how to work with that.
So Ken, when things were at their absolute worst for our main characters here,
Yeah.
how did you envision this would all wrap up, and how would this rescue come to the fore?
Well, I certainly thought it was going to be a family friendly conclusion where everyone just lived happily ever after, because that was kind of the feeling of the whole movie. It was just going to be like a big celebration.
There was kind of the overarching theme of wholesomeness here, wasn't there?
No. So anyway, I just kind of assumed that everyone was going to die.
Did you really?
I mean, kind of like on some level, it's like they could just kill everyone off. Like, I don't know if the audience cares at this point.
It entered my mind, but it did. I genuinely feel it had that kind of overarching theme of wholesomeness.
Yeah. I think because of the way they played it, like you were saying, like, or everyone was just kind of genuine. So like, it just wouldn't really make sense.
Like when the zombie child is chasing Chakotay around the house, and he's like, "You're lucky I like kids," while he's throwing the birdcage at him.
It's like, there goes the neighborhood.
There goes the neighborhood. That is the wholesomeness of the film right there. It's he wouldn't even shoot a zombie child trying to eat his flesh.
Yeah.
Instead, he just ran away like the pansy that Chakotay often has been in many episodes of Voyager.
For the love of God, man. So anyway, long story short, Chakotay gets inside the compound and gets the girls out and had spread gas everywhere in the meantime.
Well, it's not really that he didn't really get the girls out. It's he brought the one who was supposedly murdered and brought her to the place.
You're right.
And together, she infiltrated the base. She got her sister. They get the really ugly kids that they rescue.
Yeah.
And then Chakotay, sabotages the vehicles. The enemy vehicles.
The children we'll mention also, who have no idea what's going on still.
None.
Completely clueless children.
Absolutely clueless. And these are children who are like 10 and 12 years old, too.
Yeah.
Like, they're not like little kids. They're
treated like luggage in this film.
They are. And that's about the degree of their usefulness to the plot as well.
Yeah. So anyway, they escape, and I guess Chakotay just poured gasoline everywhere.
Or he like sabotaged some fuel lines or something. You see him fooling around underneath a vehicle at one point
Okay.
in like a cutscene. You know, it's just there's a guard walking around and he's just under the car looking around like, oh crap, I better finish what I'm doing. It looked like he had a stick of dynamite or something.
Yeah.
But later on, they talk about the smell of gasoline and
Yeah.
big bada boom.
And then, well, yeah, you get your scene then with the zombie guy who reaches over and turns the key, and then everything explodes.
And that brings us to another topic that we should explore in the future, which is why do we keep giving driver's licenses to zombies?
It's a good question.
Like, we're located here in the great state of Florida, and I got to say that maybe 6 out of 9 drivers are zombies.
Yes.
Or near pure zombification.
Zombie adjacent.
It's very dangerous roads, and we really should do something about this problem.
Very true.
And I'm just glad that the film, if it did nothing else, touched on that important social topic. And another thing I wanted to mention too was there are 2 instances of drinking and driving in this film.
Very blatant.
Incredibly blatant. So the first instance is when Sam, the cheerleader, is driving along on some nighttime road, and she's having a dream sequence. And she's in an old car. She's got like a prom dress on or something, and she's just chugging away. I think it was Miller Lite was the beer that was used.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was one of the many product placements which we have heretofore discussed in some detail. And I thought that was pretty reckless because, like, in the film, she's only supposed to be like 16.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like a double whammy of like that's incredibly inappropriate.
And when she gets pulled over by the cops too, she's like comically like, "Oh no!" and like throws the can into the back seat like it's gonna do anything. Like she spikes it into the back seat.
Throws it in the back seat, fluffs her hair, puts some breath spray or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just all the typical idiot stuff.
But it was a dream. So
it was a dream.
It was
yeah.
all okay.
But what was not okay is when Chakotay comes to the rescue at the end, driving that beautiful cherry Buick and drinking.
Yeah.
Granted, he's in the desert. The world's come to an end. And he's got his full cowboy regalia on at this time. You notice he has more costume changes than the women in this film?
Yeah, or at least as many.
At least as many. He's got like his initial trucker outfit, which doesn't look like a trucker at all. He's got his Santa outfit, and then he has his cowboy garb.
And doesn't he have a different outfit in his mom's house?
He might a
or was
little
that
bit.
The trucker?
I think it was a variation on the trucker outfit.
And then he has a suit.
And then he has a suit on at the end. I mean, he has like 5 costume changes.
That's very true.
That's a lot of costume changes. That's more costume changes than he had in all 7 years of Star Trek Voyager.
I was going to say, you could have had some better action figures from this movie.
You really could have. You could have had cowboy Buick driving drunk driver Chakotay.
I mean, don't we owe it to ourselves to have that?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. We need to get what was that? Obvious Plant needs to get behind that on Instagram. Obvious Plant. They need to make that action figure. Another fun part I noticed too is a glaring continuity error. Chakotay takes off his gloves twice in the radio station when we first meet him. He's in the doorway. He's pulling off one glove, and then he's getting the other. And then there's another wider shot of him talking. He's got both gloves on again. And then, like in a third cut, he's walking towards the sisters, and he's pulling off his gloves a second time. Those are the worst pairs of gloves I've ever seen. He cannot get them off.
Yeah, I noticed a couple continuity errors. I noticed were in the shot reverse shot. You could see you're seeing the person who's speaking full on, and then you can see the side of the face of the other person they're talking to. In a couple scenes, they had different facial expressions from shot to shot. So like they were smiling at what they were saying, and then when it cut to their camera, they had a serious face, or like, you know what I'm saying? Because you're not supposed to see the reaction of the one face if it's going to be different, switching
That's
back to the other
absolutely
camera.
right.
So I did notice that a couple times. Once I think in the radio station, and once in the mall kind of scenes.
It's really too bad because you would think in a movie of this caliber that they would have caught these kinds of glaring continuity errors.
Well, I suspect maybe the continuity person may have also been the writer, director, whatever else it is.
That's
I don't know
true.
how much help he had on this movie.
I can only assume from the budget that a lot of the people who starred in this film may have also had their hands in the background of the production.
Yeah, I didn't really search through the credits, so that might not be the case, but
May not be, but since we're not going to do any further research on this,
right.
We're just going to assume that the entire cast was also the crew.
I mean, I'm going to take all memory of this movie and in about 5 minutes completely forget all of it.
I'm going to forget everything about this about 30 seconds after we upload this.
My only memory will be this recording.
And you know what? That's not a bad place to be.
Yeah. Then we get to like our actual ending, our epilogue ending.
Oh yes, the epilogue. So everyone ends up all in their Sunday best.
Yes.
In terrible 80s formal fashion in the streets of downtown LA, which I want to point out, like the streetlights and everything are still working. And there was a documentary on like the Discovery Channel quite a few years ago. It's like Life After People. And they talked about how like basically within 24 to 72 hours after people are gone, all the electricity will start shutting down.
Right.
Because you need people to maintain all that systems.
Which water would stop working,
sewer
would stop working.
All of that would stop working. And yet here they are many days later and everything is perfectly still functional. And I just thought that was an interesting little touch.
Yeah, I noticed that right away too. It's like power. Yeah, that's. But maybe the people running the power plant were inside.
Maybe, and they wanted to make sure that all the zombies could still get their microwaves going and have the radios turned on.
I don't know.
Maybe
they didn't feel like exploring that that level.
They certainly had enough time to, with all of the other scenes that they really drew out.
They could have had D plot about the people at the power plant.
The power plant people should have been located in the desert next to the nefarious government people. They should have been in cahoots. A lot of untapped potential with that one.
So yeah,
and at the very end of the film, we get to meet DMK, the infamous DMK that everyone has completely forgotten about at this point.
It was so much forgotten about that I did not notice it.
Absolutely, that's how well they slid that in.
I completely missed it.
Yes, so Sam, the blonde cheerleader, is upset that her sister's taking like the last man on Earth, and that's been a constant thing throughout the film. That little bit of jealousy there, and along comes at the very end in a convertible a young idiot-looking guy who has a personalized license plate of DMK. And then he just picks up Sam and they go off driving somewhere.
I mean, he also almost runs over our heroes. Like,
really does, yeah.
Like, it's close. And then they just go off together.
They just go off together.
The end.
Like, I'd like to point out, like if I met like the last woman on Earth and she just randomly showed up, I mean, I probably would go with her too. But I have to assume that not everyone would do that.
Yeah.
Some people might be a little more discerning. But then again, I mean, I guess it would be in keeping with some of these characters to just kind of throw caution to the wind.
Yeah. So I think the true epilogue would be like her getting in the car with this guy, then they go crash into a light pole. That's it.
Just wrap around, yeah. And there's no emergency services because everyone's dead.
That's just it.
And like one of them ends up a charred corpse, the other one's
that would
paralyzed.
be a really terrible time to drive dangerously.
It really would, yeah, because there's absolutely no margin for error.
Yeah.
Or at least a very insignificant margin of error.
Nothing's being maintained.
Nothing's being maintained. Within a couple of years, I mean, roads, bridges, all of that stuff will start wearing down. But it's also worth pointing out, too, a lot of that stuff wouldn't have the same normal wear and tear that it would with all the people using it.
Yeah, but, I mean, there's still weather.
There's still weather. There's still erosion. There's still water. There's salt in the air. There's oxidation. Like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco is always being repainted constantly.
Here's another concept that brings up. What other life was killed? Because it wasn't just humans. I mean, if the comet killed the dinosaurs, right?
Sure, which they suggest in the beginning.
Did it kill all the animals? Did it kill all of the bacteria that produces oxygen and obviously the plants still survive, but like, what about algae and like?
At no point do we see any animals that I can recall.
No.
Like there's no cats, there's no dogs. You don't
Well,
see
the
anybody.
dog died.
Oh, that's true. That's
At the
true.
beginning.
The dog. They do.
They
pick
found
up
dog dust.
They found dog dust and an empty dog collar where the dog used to be. So you have to assume that pretty much all animals have died. That at least were exposed to the outside air when the comet passed.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some animals left starving in a zoo somewhere. I mean, is that really the thought that the filmmakers wanted to leave us with starving animals in zoos?
No, it was just a casual observation I was thinking about.
Well,
Like, were the fish okay? They were underwater.
it's a good question. I mean, what was that comet made of that it would even do that?
Zombie radiation.
Zombie radiation. I mean, like, would it be... Because if it was something like as potent as gamma rays or had gamma ray bursts, that would fry anything.
Yeah, but it wouldn't turn into dust.
It wouldn't turn into dust. I mean, it
would just break you down on the molecular level.
Yeah, it would, but it would also destroy a lot of the plants, too.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, you know, like, was this the entire planet? Was it...
I guess that's a good point, too.
All of the... I mean, you know, how...
Because if it was a comet that was moving that fast where it was only in the sky one day, it wouldn't affect the whole world either.
It shouldn't.
Unless it was just like blanket of radiation or something.
Yeah, I think they said something about it passing through the tail of the comet.
Oh, okay.
So
that
explains a little bit.
That makes it all better.
So we have to assume that basically all natural wildlife has been killed, or the vast majority of it has been killed. You've had a mass extinction event. The vast majority of people are gone. You know, I'm not sure exactly how many people were in Los Angeles in 1984, but I know now it's like, what, over 15, 20 million?
Yeah.
It's in that range.
It's a lot of people.
And you hardly see more than maybe 5, 10 people in that whole time. So you have to assume there's like maybe at most a few thousand people left on Earth. So what about the animal life? Is that going to be enough to sustain a biosphere for the survivors?
I mean, I guess if the plants are fine, they'd just be vegetarians. But then you got to wonder about all the plants that rely on animals to survive, like, you know, pollination and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, man. Well, the bees would have been in their hives, right? Probably at night.
I mean, that dust, though.
The dust.
The dust.
But it wasn't the dust. The dust came from the people that died. Or was it the comet dust? Because here's the funny thing. Because, like, so the sky is red for a lot of this film.
Yeah.
But you never see any dust from the comet. You just see the dust from the people that died.
I think it's implied that it's like just dust magic. Like,
Magic dust?
I don't know. There's not a good explanation. There's just a hand wavy explanation. Like, this is how it works, and just be okay with it.
A hand wavy explanation.
We're not going to think about the ramifications of it. It's just going to happen. People died, and, you know, that's all we really care about.
Just a means to an end. The comet came, the people are gone, there's red dust.
And I guess you could argue also from a point of view that the movie's point of view is through the teenage kids. And they wouldn't really care about all that stuff. It's just whatever they care about is really the only thing that happens.
And they care about boys at school, Ken.
And putting on clothes.
And shopping.
And playing video games.
And video games. You know, so it's a film that's very universal in its appeal then.
God bless the 80s. So overall, I would say this was not a good movie. But I didn't hate it. I thought I kind of liked how it was told because it was so different. Like, it just stood out to me how different it was than I would expect a movie to be. And I kind of liked that aspect of it. And then a lot of it was just like picking apart about how bad it was.
I feel like the main fault of this film is just the pacing of the film. All of the plot points and everything could be forgiven if they just tightened up the story.
I think that's the problem, though, is the people aren't that interesting.
They're not interesting, and they're not even especially likable. So
what are you going to tighten up? Like, other than just like the time it takes to do things.
That literally would be it, Ken. So this movie's like an hour and 35 minutes long. You could probably condense this movie down to 45 minutes. And you would not lose anything of any meaning.
See, I think the better movie too would have been if you cut out the C plot entirely.
The nefarious government people.
I think you change your C plot. I think it would also be what I would focus on.
The problem with the C plot is that they really introduce those government people just a little too late in the film. Like, you see a glimpse of them in the opening narration. When they're at the radio station, they apparently call the radio station and talk to these survivors. And there's a short scene there. So you get a couple little glimpses of those people, but I feel like that still should have been, if they were going to use them, they should have had them a little more active earlier on.
And that there's no nod anywhere. Like, you need to have, in this kind of movie, you need to have a nod from the early in the movie that comes back in the middle or end. Not the one guy that played the video games, but like I mentioned earlier, like your flashback of showing what happened to the dinosaurs. It's like, something else is coming. Or, just this weird shadowy government organization that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not compelling at all.
It's really not compelling, and it's not particularly inventive either.
It would have been way more interesting if it was some other group of people, like, even if it was just like weird basement people, like a group of people who are known for being inside all the time, and it's kind of funny that they're the people that are left. Like, that could be your bad guys.
That would have been interesting. That would have been more interesting.
It's like the model train club shows up. Or like,
oh no.
I guess that's not
vintage hi-fi enthusiasts.
It's not nefarious enough, but yes. The basement dwellers.
I guess audiophiles weren't really a thing back then, at least not in the modern sense.
Or even the shadowy government thing makes sense, or like it could make sense if you make it something. And these people are so forgettable.
They are. None of them are memorable. They don't really stand out. And then here's the other fun part. So the girl's father is in the military, works for the government, is going off doing potentially clandestine things. And that would have been a great tie-in to have him. What if he was the guy running the secret shadowy organization?
And then it would have made sense why they were keeping an eye on these girls, too.
That would make sense. And yet...
We just solved this movie.
I think we did. We could have had the whole thing come full circle.
So when you're looking out, 5-10 years from now, and you have an eye out for our remake that we'll have in process, that'll be the new C plot.
That'll be the new C plot.
Yeah.
The military father was actually in charge of the nefarious government organization.
We'll also make it a plot point that things are going to age in real time as far as services shutting down.
We'll have to do that as well.
Yes. We're going to fix it all.
Going to fix it all, one glitch at a time. So, 1 out of 10, Ken, where would you rate this?
Okay. It's hard to say. Because on a technical level, it was fine.
The makeup and effects were actually not bad for the time period at all.
For a low-budget movie,
they did well.
The dressing of the movie was fine. The people were okay. Ultimately, the movie is completely forgettable. So I'd have to say, I've seen a lot worse movies too, though. Maybe a 3?
It's got, because a 3 out of 10 would be fair. It has to stand on its own. It's its own thing. There's no other sequels. Literally none of the other actors in this went on to anything of serious note later in their career.
I didn't feel like it was a complete waste of my time, like some movies have been that I've watched before.
Okay.
So I guess that's how I'm judging it. It's it's not that I enjoyed it a whole lot, but it wasn't a waste of my time.
Would you consider it in the rented and forget it category?
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's definitely in that.
Yeah. Or if you enjoy it as a cult classic, I could see owning it if you could pick up a cheap copy. Or not even cult classic. It's just this blip on the radar of this movie that made some money.
Well, what's amazing to me is, so I've been a lifelong, fan of Star Trek from, the mid 80s to the present, and I watched Voyager, and I do like Chakotay, and I do enjoy Voyager, but I had never heard of this film until last year.
Yeah.
It is not on anybody's radar really. And I only found about it from, a I think, a YouTube suggestion, really.
It's worth noting, too, that I was just watching the film, and, it had been mentioned to me about the main actress, because I was like, I knew her for something, and it was The Last Starfighter, was what I knew her from. And then when Chakotay came on, I was like, oh my God, like, I had no idea he was in the film, so, because I typically don't go in looking into who, like, the cast and all that kind of stuff. Unless that's a film I've seen a trailer for, or I've seen them. I like to go in, like, especially to, like, horror movies. I mean, if you want to call, this isn't really a horror movie, that's the other weird part.
It's not really a comedy. It's not really horror. It's not even straight drama. I think that's the thing that's unsettling about it. It doesn't really. It's kind of it occupies a very weird space in that regard.
And that's how I could see, given what is in the film, I could see how this movie was marketed, because you could easily cut together some clips to make this seem like an action horror movie, and it's really not.
Because it has some of the trappings of a zombie film, but it's not really a zombie film.
Yeah.
The zombies are so tertiary that they're almost inconsequential.
Yeah.
Not entirely, but they're so far below of what the movie's about and where it's going.
Like, now I'm really intrigued to try to find a trailer of this movie to see, like, what was the draw,
It almost seems like that's like that should have been some basic homework for us before doing this podcast. Note to future self.
Yeah, next time find also trailers for these movies.
Find some trailers and learn names for people.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to write it down because I can't remember anything.
Yeah, I can't remember either. And I have some things written down on a piece of paper that I haven't even looked at this entire time.
No, we didn't really need it.
But we didn't really need it. And
So
at some point too, I want to explain what complimentary cinema is.
Yeah,
Which I should have done probably at the beginning of this segment.
with the magic of editing, the end can be at the beginning.
So complimentary cinema is our way of discussing and sharing with you details of a film, often spoilers, of any film that we can find online for free that is readily accessible to any one of you, so you can share in our pleasure or horror or dismay or delight on whatever it is that we're watching that week.
And the beauty of it is that you see, when you see the episode pop up and you see what is featured in it, you can just go watch it. You don't have to stop, download anything. You don't have to, we can even just put a link potentially.
Yeah, just a link below.
Depending on what it is.
Yeah.
And you just watch it.
And you just watch it. And then if YouTube ever comes along or wherever we end up hosting this and they snag that content and delete it, well, we'll still keep the podcast up, I guess.
Yeah.
May as well.
And then you're going to have to rent it. You're out of
Then
luck.
you'll just have to search it. But at least at the time of publishing, complimentary cinema is for readily available, handily available, free digital content that's online. Some of it will be good. Some of it maybe not so good. We're going to watch it and talk about it anyway.
Perfect.
Do we have any other final thoughts on this particular matter, Ken?
I don't know. I guess, like, overall, like I said, I didn't hate it. I don't think I was as negative about it as you.
Oh, I enjoyed it fine.
But, like, I didn't have that. I wasn't necessarily, the time it took to get different places didn't necessarily hurt me as much, I think.
Well,
I don't think I was as bored with it as you were.
It hurt me because when they went other places, nothing really happened.
But that was like once I got on board with that, like, kind of from the beginning, and, like, expected it, it wasn't so bad. They were consistent with it, at least.
I guess where the pain for me comes in is that I knew that was going to happen. And I think in the end, it's a fun, campy, early 80s horror-ish film with the cinematography was pretty good. The music, while a little bit extra, wasn't bad. It was fairly well cast for what it was. Every actor in here is competent. Like, none of them are actually bad actors. They just didn't have good material to work with.
Right.
And I would definitely suggest seeing it once. But it's not the kind of film that you're going to, like, get nostalgic about and want to really revisit.
I would say I would only recommend it if you were into 80s movies or culture. Like, if you were interested in it, because without that, that's a lot of the novelty of the film to me.
You do need some of that context, I think, to be able to appreciate it too.
Yeah.
And the 80s, the 80s hairstyles I mean, that alone is almost worth the price of
I mean,
admission.
it was like the hairstyles, the music, the just how people are is different. How people treat each other and that kind of stuff is just a little different. And I guess in the end of the day, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it, but unless you want to watch a weird little 80s movie.
You heard it here first, folks. If you have absolutely nothing better to do on a Friday or Saturday night, don't watch this film. But if you do, it's there and the link will be below. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Complimentary Cinema. We're your hosts, Brian McGarry
And Ken O'Malley.
And we'll see you next time. Have a wonderful evening.